Welcome, everybody, to the Science and Engineering Library at UMass Amherst. And I want to welcome Deb McCutchen today. Deb holds an MFA from UMass Amherst right here and a graduate diploma of Science in Wildlife Management from Otago University in, New Zealand. And you are a senior lecturer too and teach junior year writing full-time here in the College of Natural Science. And I've taught her instruction here in this room with her students, and you're a very dedicated teacher. And also you share the position of Associate Director for Junior Year Writing Program with Dr. Haiban Huang, and you're a long-term member of the University Writing Committee. Yes. And you've been busy. You've written many books. And about a year ago, Deb was here talking about jellyfish dreaming. And now here you are with Electric Ice, which just came out in August 2024 and won a Speculative Literature Foundation grant. It was published by Leapfrog Press. And also Whale Road was
in 2023 with Jellyfish Dreaming, but a different press. Whale Road's creative nonfiction, and Jellyfish Dreaming and Electric Ice are part of the same series.
As I told you, she's been this 2 books in 1 year and now another book. So thank you for coming today, and thank you everybody for being here. I let you take it away.
So Electric Ice is a companion novel to Jellyfish Dreaming. Both are LGBTQ2S, which means two-spirit, evidently. Journeying back in time, Jack tells June the story of his long trek across the Pacific and down the frozen Great Lakes, through lightning storms, canals, and rivers to the eastern Salt Sea where they first met. In the prologue, Invisible Gods, the further back Jack remembers, the more the stories he tells June become myth. Riding the great wave after a catastrophe sent his family across the Pacific Ocean, riding a ghost bison, and being ridden himself by the trickster god Coyote across country to where 20% of the world's drinkable water freezes over while he sleeps. In Electric Ice, Jack goes to sleep in the snowstorm and wakes in the dark, buried under tons of snow and ice. Escaping up a chimney, Jack's rescued by a group of Inuit ice fishing on Lake Michigan. Jack and his companion ice sail, skate, and hang glide into a deadly battle over Niagara's frozen waterfall. Along the way, they discover a deadly threat from the past when an unexpected thaw exposes toxins lethal to those living on the now rotting ice. Sledding his way east into the great thaw, Jack loses everyone he loves, but finds June. According to NASA, in a thundercloud, millions of pieces of ice bump together. Small crystals charge positive and drift upward, bigger pellets charge negative and fall down. The separation creates electrical tension, lightning, also called electric ice. I wake in the dark, so cold my knees can barely unbend, as if it's been a while. My fingertips brush against a box of wood. A coffin? Have I been buried? I panic, kick out, and a wall thunks open on stiff hinges. It's still dark, but I remember. The chimney cupboard. I crawled in for warmth, but the cold is absolute, every surface, including my body, like ice. Being born again stinks. It's like this every time. Disorienting, I have no idea how long I've slept, can barely access memories, scattered like wind-blown trash. I know it was cold, snowing a lot. There were 2 old people, kind, who fed me. But they left me alone. A tear freezes on my cheek. If I don't get out of here, I may sleep again for good. My fingers slip through thick dust. My clothes are shreds. I must have been here for a very long time. This is how I survive. When resources are scarce, I hunker down, grow small, sleep. When it's time, I start over, eat, grow. This has been my life for so long. Yes, is that what I remember? It hardly seems outside conditions have improved enough to wake me. It's dark, silent, so very cold. A surge of angry disappointment shakes my hands. Why did I wake? The world could have ended and I wouldn't have to know. But sleep beckons like death. I'm awake now and I want to live. There's a faint smell of old char and a breeze so slight it's barely there, an absence of stillness. What if I've slept through the end of the world? Maybe dust and darkness are all that's left? The darkness is deafening. I duck carefully inside what feels like a fireplace. Pale light glimmers above, bringing a snapshot of memory. This was a cozy yellow place once, stiflingly warm. Climbing up inside a chimney, naked and cold, scrapes my back. Brick crumbles and fingers sink into rotten grout. At the top, bricks collapse outward as I scramble free onto a roof of white. After the dark, it's too much. I stand shakily, afraid of falling into brightness. I cover my eyes and breathe bitter air. I can wait for centuries, I think. But that means waking to the grief of each new beginning. Everything dies and changes around me. Only I reset and start over. Shapes slowly define in the cracks between my fingers, swooping lines and lovely spires of white. The soles of my feet are numb pads. The city in my jumbled memory has become a long slope of snow punctured by twisted spikes of wind-carved ice. I've lived too long, and the earth has frozen over. I'd shed more tears if I could. There's movement down the slope. My eyes track the motion before my brain comprehends. A sail flits across the ice, a dark human-made thing. The world isn't dead. I stumble forward, numb feet slip, and I'm out of control, sliding down the steep slope. There's nothing to slow me. I hit a bump and go airborne, yelling rustily as I crash from slope to flat, skittering across smoother, darker ice, slowly losing momentum and gliding to a stop, gasping. I crouch over my poor abused feet, shivering violently. Be still, breathe, assess. Despair that accompanies each awakening is dulled by shock and the necessity to focus on surviving this next round. A voice speaks into the bitter air. Where in the ice you've been hiding? A cloth lands on me and I hug it to my abraded flanks. In a cupboard, I want to say, but stuttering memories suggest that strange as each new start is for me, people find me even stranger. Best to say nothing. I focus watering eyes on a mummy of colorful rags standing over me, legs and torso thick bundles of wrapped cloth and plastic. The speaker's face is hidden by a hood. Exposed lips are greased against the cold. The light voice sounds female, though mine does too, and I am not female. I would do a lot for that outfit, but she seems kind, so I wait, shivering. Let's get you to the family. A clubbed hand hugs my arm as I lurch upward. The woman half carries me to a boat as ragged as she, a mishmash of boards above rusty metal runners, topped with a colorful patchwork sail snapping in the wind. The boat fights to take off, and I remember sailing on water, but my skull is a hollow gourd filled with scraps whirling unconnected. The woman dumps me onto her weird boat. Hold on, she laughs, but there's nothing to hold. She leaps aboard, hauling the boom and planting her feet in one graceful motion as the sail catches wind and yanks us forward. The sail covers the glaring sun, and I can finally see. The city on the lake is gone, swallowed in a spray of white and speed and laughing woman. The wind catches her laughter, plucking it from her mouth and curling around the mast. Her joy helps me relax into this strange place that will be home for the next little while. Clear sky, hot sun, cold air, brutal light, ice. So after meeting with the scary grandmother matriarch of the family, Akiak, who's the one who found Jack, is tasked with clothing and then feeding the newest family member. We fly over the ice to a sharp scrape of runners instead of the rhythmic slap and knock of waves. And the speed, I've never sailed so fast. Shapes in the distance resolve into dimples in the ice as we approach. We scrape to a stop near a hole with a man crouched inside. He greets the girl as Akiak. She responds, "Look." The man's face shifts from dour to delighted when she adds, "This is our new person." He stares at me until the stick he's holding dips sharply towards a hole at his feet. Akiak hefts a spear from a nearby pile and stabs deeply into the hole, and together they haul out a squirming monster. It's as long as I am, with a pale yellow belly. A snake, an eel, a fish? "Laker," the man grunts and slashes it open with one swipe. He reaches inside the body and pulls out a fistful of warm yellow eggs, roe. He gestures me over and fills my cupped hands. "Eat." I'm trembling with sudden, overwhelming hunger. This is food I understand. This is my food, fresh, slippery fish eggs bursting with energy like tiny suns. And the size of them! I suck them down, moaning. The man fills my hands again. I look up for more just as Luke pops the last of the roe into his own mouth. He looks guilty when he sees me empty-handed and eager for more. Akiak laughs and pins the fish with a spear, ripping off the skin and slicing through muscled sides to make instant sashimi. So good. My body vibrates with well-being. This is what I woke for. We eat the fish down to skeleton and skin. My stomach bulges. I climb on the boat and nestle into my patchwork covering, already dozing when Akiak leaps aboard and lets loose the boom in one smooth motion. We scrape out across the ice, back towards the frozen city. The city is more beautiful in death than it ever was in life. As we race towards the southern shore, towers and bridges of ice become a warped fairy tale of frosted shapes, stalagmites of ice protruding sideways in wind-twisted tentacles. I'd wondered why the lake was so clear of snow, but the ice at my back makes it obvious. The city's buried because of the lake. Where are we going? I call out. Half fearful, Akiak expects me to go back under the buried city. She jerks her head towards shore. To the sun god, I think she yells. I wonder if she also has an imaginary god she talks to in her head. Maybe everyone needs one in order to cope? We rattle over uneven drift near shore, slowing as she eases off the sheet. We jump off, and I help drag the boat into an ice cave that leads into a deeply buried building. The wind follows, whistling noisily like someone blowing into bottles. We walk past rows of sailing hulls, through a tunnel of dense-packed snow, and into a quieter, dimmer space. There's a fire inside and a boy bent over some kind of parchment. Akicha, the girl calls. I wonder what's up with all the harsh Ak names. And when he turns around, he's breathtaking. It's suddenly quite clear who the sun god is. Akicha shares his sister and my blue-black hair, dark eyes, and ochre skin tone. He moves with extraordinary grace. Akicha invented the ice sailing boats. His workshop is dug in near the city so he can scavenge materials. He also makes fishing spears and nets, whatever the family needs. He'll be the village leader when the grandmother dies. Akiak says this with some bitterness. My sister should be the leader, the boy sighs. I just want to make boats. Yes, I'd be better, but my job is to make babies for the family. Akiak slants her eyes at me. That will be your job too. Not me, I laugh, stomach clenching. I don't do offspring. The siblings stare at me as if I've uttered a heresy. Why not? Akiak's voice is tense. It's against my religion, I say lightly. Akiak stands abruptly and leaves the room. We hear her dragging the boat onto the ice. I start to follow, but Akicha stops me. Stay, he says. She's upset. Why should my personal beliefs bother her, I say bitterly, as if wars hadn't started over these kinds of things. She hopes she'll take responsibility off her. We have few females. Not a female, I say, a little late. What? The sun god stares. Does the grandmother know? Apparently not. I was sent off to be fed by a hopeful-looking fisherman, I laugh. Ah, never laugh at hospitality. I could kick myself. You lied? No one asked, not even my name. They just decided I was Acna. Oh my, that's the boy named after the sun sits on the ground grinning. Meaning? Goddess of fertility. I thump down beside him. Feh. Why would anyone bring children into this world? Then how would people continue, he asks naively, this innocent, smart-as-hell boat builder who thinks life is simple. She'll still want you to breed, he says. You aren't related. You really male? Never said that, I stand abruptly. So, where do I sleep? When he starts to ask the obvious, I cut him off. Call me Jack, okay? And you're Keisha and Sis is Aki, or I'll get everyone mixed up and call you all Ak. Huh. Jack and Acna sound similar. Still not a fertility goddess, I say firmly. He sighs. If we call you Jack, the grandmother will know. Better than old witchy woman dishing me up to the local fisherman, yeah? I really hope I don't hear her mutter. That might not stop her as he leads the way to the sleeping area. Keisha decides to search for more metal under the ice city. This is a little bit later. I stall, deeply reluctant to return to the dark. As reassurance, he shows me a precious piece of flint and steel he uses to light rebar torches wrapped in fish oil-soaked rags. He also has a working crank flashlight. A city find, I ask? He nods. We sometimes find more than we can use, but you have to dig deep for unbroken things. The snow tunnel behind Keisha's workshop narrows and twists until we lose the light. Keisha has to ask me to walk faster. I grab the back of his shirt. He laughs. How old are you? He teases. That's a question I never answer. That's an answer that frightens everyone. Keisha stops and pulls my hand from his clothing. He digs the flashlight from his pack. We've left the tunnel for a bigger space. The whiz of the crank announces our presence to the dark. I imagine tons of shifting weight overhead. We must be right under the frozen city. Even after the population crash preceding the snows, this must be the graves of tens of thousands. If I take one more step into the dark, I'll panic. I'll abandon Keisha, and he'll see me for the self-serving coward I am. Keisha turns on the light. How can it be beautiful knowing what it is? But the lit cavern is so otherworldly, it takes my breath away. Light fractures away into the distance through a maze of ice shards. Shining columns angle away in all directions. We're below the dead city looking up at the end of the world. We walk silently into a catastrophe frozen in time, a catacomb of broken things. Keisha grins and takes my hand. I watch his profile as we walk. He's warm-toned and lithe in contrast to the backdrop of glittering blue and angular white shadows. I imagine his internal thoughts as richly organic, like dark loam. I'm starting to relax when there's a snap and the light goes out. We're pitched into absolute blackness. The crank light failed. The hair rises on my arms until I feel Keisha's hand squeezing mine. I really can't stand the dark. Easy, he says and starts to hum. Someone humming is not a frightened person. Keisha removes his hand and I flinch, but the humming continues. I hear him scrabbling through his bag, but without his touch to ground me, the darkness becomes heavy. I lose my breath. Invisible tons of ice overhead press down until my knees buckle. I slump into a ball, small as I can make myself. My body is ready to do its thing. Heart rate slowing, breathing shallow. Conditions are poor. It's time for the sleep that's not quite sleep. It's dangerous to do here, but danger and hardship are the triggers after all. My survival strategy working against me. Only Keisha's humming keeps us connected. There's the scritch of a torch being lit. The undercity appears again, no longer blue-white, but orange with red-filled shadows. It smolders. I manage one deep shaking breath, then lose it again in the smoke. Jack? Keisha's voice calls out, but I've become small and distant. I can barely feel the world. I'm invisible. Jack! My skin burns. I've never, in a long, imperfect memory, been interrupted during regression. Now I'm stuck halfway, and it hurts. I seem to be sitting in a giant kettle by the fire in Keisha's room, boiling. Am I being made into soup? I think I ask him that before I pass out again, but this time it's just the little sleep. I rise to the surface of awake, skin to skin against Keisha's chest under piled blankets. It's distressing, but so warm. I keep apologizing. Keisha tells me to shut up and go back to sleep. There's a sense of time passing, so I can't have been in the deep sleep. I keep talking just to be sure. I hear myself and the rumble of Keisha's responses, but I'm enough in the dream world to know I'm talking nonsense, a conversation that only starts to make sense at the end as I wake. No, I'm not going to cook and eat you. Yes, I figured out you're not exactly a boy or girl. Sorry. No, I'll never take you under the ice again. Why the frack didn't you tell me it got that bad? So, you awake enough to hear what I'm saying? Yes. Really? Keisha rolls on his side to face me. My head slips off his shoulder and we stare at each other. Welcome back. I've never wanted so badly to explain myself. What happened? Dunno. I dragged you back, warmed you up. Sorry. What are you? Keisha asked softly. I don't know how to answer. I'm a boy. I'm a girl. I'm neither. I'm nothing. I've heard of folk like you, he says hesitantly. Really? I say bitterly. Where can I find them? It was just stories. Keisha reaches to pet my hair. I hold my breath, afraid he'll stop. My first family were traders. They told of a two-spirit woman like you. She traveled with the family before I was born. She knew things, helped when folks were ill. She told tales about the world. Every story ended with her traveling towards the sun. I was heading east, I say breathlessly, when the ice caught me. Will you keep going? Keisha whispers. It sounds like it matters to him. I want it to matter. We stare at each other in the firelight until his warm hand slips down to rest on my cheek. The sun god snores. I wonder what this alien feeling of well-being is, whether something as simple as a friend's touch can be called happiness. I fall asleep, dreaming of chasing the setting sun, chasing the sun. On the full moon, Aki returns to tell us it's time I met the family. She watches us closely. I don't want to go, but I feel responsible. Aki found me, fed me, and I've let her down just by being who I am. Keisha hugs Aki, and her expression lightens a little. I smile, thinking of the warmth of his hugs. Keisha and I sail out in his newest boat into a night spotlit by the moon. The new boat is made of wind. We heave to around near the mound village minutes before Aki, ruddy from the cold, our laughter gusting away behind us. But the laughing girl is quiet and distant now. The three of us walk towards a yellow bonfire competing with the silver moonlight. People in familiar mummy wraps are silhouetted around the fire. There's still things I haven't told Keisha, a fresh tingle of worry. Once he knows, will this warmth be taken away? I am Anak, an old woman calls out as we approach. Grandmother of all, who comes and how will you aid this family? I am Akiak the Brave, Aki responds. I bring glory to the family. The grandmother's silent, as if this is unexpected. I am Keisha, Keisha calls quickly as we move closer. Maker of fast boats, inventor. The grandmother frowns with every wrinkle of her leathery skin. In the firelight, hoods thrown back, I can see the faces of the waiting people. All have variations of the same ochre skin, black hair, and eyes with heavy epicanthal folds that targeted me as different during my travels. There are faces carved with experience, shy, resigned, grinning, hopeful faces. For a dizzy moment, I imagine them as adult possibilities of myself, if I'd ever made it to adulthood. They lived the lifetimes I missed while sleeping. This is Keisha's family, all that's left of the fertile earth, standing in warm contrast to the silver and white of the night ice. I breathe the bitter air. Aki and Keisha took a stance. It's my turn now. What's to lose other than endless lifetimes chasing a distant sun? I want a place with these people. There's a warmer sun hidden in this ice. Hey, I say conversationally since we're face to face now. I'm Jack, teller of Unfinished Tales. Keisha stifles a laugh. Aki's stone-faced. Akna? The grandmother asked. Jack, I reply firmly. Female? She says hopefully. Not at all, I say. Shit, the old woman says, which totally breaks the mood, and everyone starts talking at once. So Madeline suggested that I ask for any questions you might have. One thing I could comment on is that Jack does not go on with Keisha. He actually sails on with Aki, which is kind of interesting. I think my habit with jellyfish dreaming was always to make it so that everything they tried failed right up until the end. And I think some of that may have slipped into electric ice as well, but it's a little bit more hopeful, actually. I think one of the readers said, what did they say? Oh, the Speculate Foundation said, a fascinating exploration of the near future world told from the perspective of one of the most unique characters of speculative fiction. But I guess what I really liked was when a friend said, jellyfish dreaming is a head trip like nothing you've ever read. I love that. So you guys have any questions for me? Thank you.
I was wondering how you came up with your characters, and especially how you decided to write about characters that are two spirited, not one thing or the other.
I'm not really sure why I did it. I think, well, both of my daughters are queer. My grandmother's queer. My brother-in-law's queer. I think some of it was that, but some of it was also this idea of the witness, the person that could last through the centuries and witness the things that are going on. Because it's so easy for all of us to forget what's happening, forget the baseline, forget, like if it was a marine park. We don't know how rich a marine park should be. You know what I mean? We don't have those baselines. Same with land parks. We don't really know what they're supposed to be like. And I think with somebody who's been here for 200 years or so, which is Jack, we're able to sort of get a little bit more context for the way things should be, or maybe how things have changed over time. Yeah.
There's this notion of witness where the hopefulness emerges in the otherwise post-apocalyptic story.
I think so, yeah. Yeah. In Jellyfish Dreaming, you don't really know whether Jack dies in the end or not, but it's really implied that he goes on. I think you don't know. Maybe it's clearer than I think. Where does the hopefulness come in? The hope is, well, in Electric Ice in particular, I think the hope is that, again, while he finds out about the toxins in the ice, while he battles this lightning storm in the Niagara Falls, and it gets even worse, after a while. He loses everybody that he loves, but then he finds June, and all of a sudden there's hope again. It's like all he needs is somebody that he can love, I guess. I don't know. It's a good question, but I'm not sure quite whether I can answer it entirely. Yeah, and the book I'm working on now, The Plastic Eaters, that's another way. That's more about polyandry, I think, or polycules. It's an island of plastic floating in the Great Gyre that they've created. They've netted together all this plastic so that it will float, and then they've started planting trees and coconuts and all this other stuff on them. And to me, I guess all of the message in all the stories is that we have to change our behavior now, or we're not going to survive. And the people who can change do survive. So I guess there's that. They're not terribly violent. They're just there's a lot going on, I guess. Yeah.
So now I'm hearing your next book is also about water, ice,
Yeah.
jellyfish, whales.
Yeah.
The giant.
I spent at least 10 years of my life out on the water.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. The Whale Road is creative nonfiction about sailing with whale researchers through the South Pacific, and it's probably the most non-fictional thing that I've written. It's memoir based, and I ended up in New Zealand. I did a degree there. I married the guy who followed me home. The whole 9 yards. If you guys have time and want, I can read just 5 minutes from the new book from Plastic Eaters, if you guys are interested in that. Yeah?
Anything else about the reading of?
I'm curious if you have any backstory and like a future history that you've worked out in your mind preceding these stories.
Honestly, that's been the problem with Plastic Eaters, is that I had too much of that in my head. And it really caused problems with filling in, with just doing the work of creating the world as it is there. Because Jellyfish, I honestly wrote when I was heading home each day from school, from teaching. And so it's sort of snapshots. And then I thought, oh, that's like memory. Memory is like snapshots. But then when I got to Electric Ice, everybody kept saying, oh, you have to write something more linear. So I wrote a travel story, And then with Plastic Eaters, it was like the world was already created in my head. So it actually caused problems. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you self-published.
No. The Jellyfish Dreaming won a Leapfrog Global Fiction Prize, so it got published in both the UK and the US. And then The Whale Road got published by another press at the same time, but it was a republication because it had been published in New Zealand and the UK before that. And that was only because I was at a conference where I won a publicist for a week, and she got them both published. But and then Electric Ice was the year after that. Did that answer your question? Okay. You guys want to hear this 5 minutes? Okay. So Plastic Eaters is about Dear George, a chemical engineer with no moral compass whatsoever, and the chancellor's wife who's struggling with grief and guilt, and they run away to sea together. George to brag about his plastic eaters to his polymer colleagues in the UK, and the chancellor's wife to get away from a bitter husband after losing her beloved stepson to a stinging jellyfish. The two sail through the great garbage ocean to the Atlantic Gyre, where George wants to test his plastic eaters even after they find people living on floating islands of netted plastic. The chancellor's wife stops him, falls in love with the people and the children on the Chash Islands, and George abandons her in the Gyre, where she lives in a loving community while George merely exists, wallowing in his own guilt and loneliness. That's what I've got so far. And I'm just going to read George's piece at this point. The Plastic Eaters. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. That's Edward Lear. The sagacity of owls has long stood as a categorical anomaly in a world in which to be called bird brain remains an insult. That's conservationist Jonathan Slade. George. Dear George is as smart in his field as he is clueless about people. He understands this sometimes, but he's also been told he's brilliant. He's a chemical engineer who has become obsessed with the idea that he can save the world with a common bacterium, Commomonas testosteroni, a bacteria as knuckle-headed sounding as George. George is a big guy with a big head. He just knows C. testosteroni can become nature's little plastic recycling center. George truly believes he would be the hero who could save everything. Never mind that a PhD student at the Royal Netherlands Institute for Sea Research said the same thing way back in 2023 about the bacterium Rhodococcus ruber that supposedly ate and digested plastic. Or that the Kyoto Institute of Technology, Japan, first discovered plastic-eating bacteria when they identified Aedeonella sakiensis even further back in 2016. And let's just forget that snotty-nosed 16-year-old Canadian brat from the Waterloo Institute who was acknowledged at the Canada-wide Science Fair in Ottawa in 2008, for crying out loud, for discovering the Sphingomonas and Pseudomonas could break down polyethylene bags. The kid even suggested a recycling process. George doesn't acknowledge that one. They weren't an adult. What did they know? George hopes the kid went bald in later life. George himself has an enviable thick head of hair. George has muscles. George is an adult. George is sort of sure that the University of Cork in Ireland was credited long ago with accidentally creating a mutant enzyme that could break down plastic within just a few days. George quite likes the polymer guys at the current UCork, not that he's heard from them in a while. There's also the waxworm study reported in the Smithsonian in 2022 that George found on the Chancellor's weird little wiki. Waxworms were moth larvae that lived in bees' honeycombs. They were the only animals with 2 enzymes in their saliva that broke down plastic at room temperature within just a few hours. But do waxworms even still exist without their long-gone bee hosts? Does George really care? Because even with all the research back in the good old days, none of the researchers' answer solves the actual problem. With at least 12 million tons of plastic being dumped into the ocean every year back when the human population was more, and with all that plastic still leaching from landfills now, and with how dangerous plastic is to whatever wildlife is left, though long-gone seabirds and marine mammals don't really need to be factored in anymore, the problem is not breaking down plastic. George has that in the bag, but in removing plastic from the ocean. However, George is able to compartmentalize, so he puts removal firmly out of mind as impossible and continues to research C. testosterone as his favorite contender for the race to just dissolve plastic altogether. Plastic was made to be durable, notorious for lingering about, polluting ecosystems, seafood, water, human bloodstreams. So dissolving or digesting plastic wherever it occurs is clearly the best solution to George. Dear George, his mother used to call him that while shaking her head side to side. knows he rarely thinks things through enough to see the big picture. Look at his love life. George is in love with the Chancellor's wife. George has never been in love with anyone before, has never willed someone more happiness than himself. But Murray is just so, strong-willed, confident. She makes firm decisions based on clearly articulated ethics. She even named herself after her favorite thing, a swamp, in French. Okay, maybe that is a little odd. But she is simply beautiful inside and out. With her straight black hair and ochre skin, Mariah is also married. The last part doesn't matter to George, though maybe it ought to, since it is the Chancellor she's married to, and he controls George's research, grants, and trade. But it is so clear that the Chancellor just doesn't care. It's a loveless marriage and has been since. George sighs. Well, that's in the past, a time when perhaps his lovely Murray probably shouldn't have been quite so confident about her decisions. But that's what good partners are for, to help each other make better decisions. George is absolutely positive he can help Murray in that regard. Today, for example, Murray came to him saying she'd had enough. It was time to leave. She intended to go to sea. George slowed her down, patting the air with his hands, made her think things through, consider her options. And by the time she mentioned that it was a chance for George himself to reach beyond his current research limitations, show off his discovery to the overseas polymer research in the UK, with whom he used to communicate with monthly, and get the recognition he deserves, that's when George became convinced she had a point. They could go to sea together. George has a little solar airboat he uses for his research. It won't foul a propeller in the ocean of trash out there. He also has a huge craving to exchange ideas with other experts in his field and prove his excellence. He would be with the Chancellor's wife. George could save the world. That's it. Thank you, guys. I'm happy to sign. Well, actually, these books are signed, but I can adapt them for anything anybody wants. If anybody's interested in buying one. And I do have Venmo and I have some change as well. Sure.
So I'm hard of hearing, so I'm not sure if I got this right, but I thought you said most of the stories are about we don't start changing. You don't need to clarify it, but you said the people that change will survive. And do you mean individuals or do you mean peoples, like groups?
I think groups need to change, but it starts with individuals, I guess. I feel like supporting each other works better than what's happening in this country today with economy and politics. I think that we are absolutely too late to do anything about climate change, but how we survive that could matter. Like, I think in the end of Jellyfish Dreaming, the very last scene is about people just raking the bays for plastic and dissolving it. So, they have a purpose in life, and they work together, and they have one member of the group that's a shaman that can remember things farther back than anybody else, which is similar to Jack. And it's Jack's kid. I'm giving it all away, but it's not really the point. The point is that we really have to change our behavior, or we're gone, we're done. And I think we might be done anyway. But I guess these books are my way of hoping that maybe we're not entirely done. Does that make any sense? Anybody else have questions? Please help yourself to food. There's quite a lot of good stuff over there. I'm going to get some myself. Thank you. Thanks for showing up.
We're not done.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
So what I got is like, how does it work with the story where they kept asking if there a boy or a girl?
The main character is intersex.
Oh, okay.
And they're called two-spirit at one point, which is important because that's a way of showing, what is two-spirit? Does anybody know? What is two-spirit?
I didn't think it was, when I hear intersex, I thought that means like you're physically, like a
Well,
combination.
physically they are intersex,
They are? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But they also, I think the potential for two-spirit is there because they're sort of in both camps, if that makes sense. You're right though, that they are intersex, so there is a difference between two-spirit and intersex. And two-spirit is often used with indigenous peoples as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and this is like the setting. Is it in somewhere like with indigenous people?
Jack is from Japan, more or less, but he looks a lot like the Inuit that he discovers on the ice. So he's not necessarily Inuit himself, but he's got the phenotype. He's got the straight black hair, the ochre skin, and the heavy apicantral folds in his eyes.
So then the Inuit people are like, we learn like their views about like intersex people throughout the book.
No, he leaves pretty early. The grandmother is pretty brutal to the kids, and Jack and Aki decide to leave, and they sail away. And so that it really follows their journey. But there's one point where they try to send back a woman and a bunch of kids to the family because they really need more women, for example. And this woman is strong. She's like a tiger mom. And so they're not too worried about her getting, well, actually, yeah, they're not worried about her getting influenced by the cultural impact of not having many females, so all the females have to breed, kind of thing, which is kind of from Day of the Triffids, to be honest.
What did you say from day?
What's that?
Did you say?
I said that idea is kind of from Day of the Triffids.
What is that?
It's a book. It's a sci-fi book. Does that? I'm
Yeah.
happy to give you the reading if you want to just read it on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can have it. Thank you for coming.